so much, Dr. Sengupta, for this introduction. Thank you so much, Professor Jha, also for the welcome speech, and Dr. Yadav also for your introduction. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my sheer pleasure to be here today. And I am also very happy that despite of the many kilometers that are actually parting us, we can connect via internet and we can speak today on this topic. And the topic that I would like to talk about is teaching Hindi in Poland, like a brief introduction about how it is, how it started with Indian studies and Indology, which will lead me also to the topic of Hindi language, because the studies on India, studies on the topic which we call the discipline that we call Indology, basically started with studies based on Sanskrit language. I would like to briefly introduce first the forefathers of Indology in Poland, and to highlight the main characters which are responsible to broaden the information, broaden the knowledge on India in Poland, not exactly only in Hindi, but also Sanskrit, also philosophy, also many other cultural aspects of India. And then I would like to talk about my topic, which since you already know, I hold a PhD in Hindi literature. So that is that was my research for many years, and it is still my research. Although now I'm more modern oriented, I mostly now research the connection between the word and image. So turning a little bit into visual studies, but I'm still faithful to my first discipline, which is language and literature. And that is my love forever. And of course, the Hindi literature has the privilege to be the first one. That's the first love of mine. So first, I would like to say a few words about the beginnings, how it started and when it started, because I think that most of us know how it started globally with Max Miller, with many other characters that we probably know, with the British, with the Germans, with the French and maybe other countries, but how it started with Poland and when it also started. So we have the discipline which is called Indology. And Indology, it is basically from the German description, which means Indian Kunde, which means exactly studies on India, the broadening or research on knowledge about India in general. But obviously that was based on Sanskrit, Pali, and other Asian languages. So Indology was being taught as a discipline for many years, and it is still a subject on many universities in Europe, but also in Poland. But then also we have something like a modern phenomena. So we have the modern South Asian studies, which are including, or which are maybe more oriented on the world, or based on the world after 1947, after 1945, and are based on the modern countries and the modern culture, modern societies and whatsoever, and also on modern languages. So as disciplines, we have like two different grounds. There is Indology, which is still there, and there is also the modern South Asian studies. In many places, like for example in Krakow, it also includes learning modern languages, but not always. So Indology as a subject, I mean, in the first meaning, based on Sanskrit and Pali studies, and mostly oriented towards philosophy, towards religious studies, towards cultural studies, and also literature. Started in Poland in 19th century. As you can see, it's 1893 for Jagiellonian University, for Krakow. So we were the first ones to introduce. And then Warsaw University in 1918. So that will be the beginning, how it started and how it was rooted in our Polish research and our Polish science. So when it goes to Krakow, because we were the first, and I'm really happy that I can speak to you from Krakow, and also as a representative of that university, which was established in 14th century. So 1860, that is the beginning of Sanskrit studies. And just because before I briefly introduced the the description of Indology, and I use this term in German, Indian Kunde. That also means that there was a deep connection, and that was a deep connection between universities, between the academics from Germany and from Poland. And also the Indology was also a little bit based on the academics from Germany, or the Polish academics who went to Germany to study first, and then they came back to Poland, and they made this effort to establish Indian studies here in Poland. So this is how it started with the first three persons that you can see here on the display: Bernard Yulk, Jan Baudouin de Courtenay, and Jan Rozwadowski. They were the first teachers of Sanskrit, but they were also the first researchers of Sanskrit language, which, as you know, it's not that easy to comprehend and to learn. Not only learning the language, but using this language as a tool to read the ancient text and to research and to know, to understand the Indian soul via religion, philosophy, and etc. So the first chair for Sanskrit studies in Krakow was established in 1893. And that was the joint effort by a few people, but the first professor of Sanskrit, it was Leon Mańkowski, who served as professor of Sanskrit until 1906. And this the next the next professor, the next Sanskrit researcher was Professor Andrzej Gawroński. Name very familiar to everybody who was studying Indology in Poland, because when you study Indology, as for example, I was a student of Indology for 5 years, so for 3 years we had a proper Sanskrit teaching in instruction in Sanskrit in order to be able to read the text in original. So I had the pleasure to read some text in original. For example, Abhijnana Shakuntalam. That was not the whole story, but some parts of that. Some parts of Kathasarit Sagara, and some other also philosophical texts, including some Upanishads. So we started with the textbook written by Andrzej Gawroński. So this distinguished scholar not only was a translator and a researcher, but he also wrote the first textbook, which is still used. I believe it is still used by Polish scholars. I think it got reissued now. The copy that we were using was having very bad script, and that definitely was very difficult to read. But now it has the new edition has better script, and it's more more readable, I would say. I'm seeing only the visual part of that. So Andrzej Gawroński, he did his PhD in Leipzig in Germany. So that also, you see the connection between the German academicians and Poland at the time. And in 1916, he got a professor. He was appointed as a full professor at Jagiellonian University, and he was doing his research on the dramas, basically on the dramas. So this is why in the textbook we also get to read some parts of some dramas as well. And the next distinguished person in Krakow would be Professor Helena William-Grabowska, the first woman and distinguished scholar. She was a linguist, knowing many languages. Some say that you could count 15 or even more languages, but as Indian languages are concerned, there would be Hindi language, Bengali, and Sanskrit mainly, but also some other languages as well. Professor William-Grabowska, she also knew, as you can see, Pali and Prakrit and Tibetan language, and also some Dravidian languages. So she was a real linguist, you could say, and she has translated Vetala Pancha Vimshatika into Polish, and also Kathasarit Sagara, some parts of that, and some parts of Mahabharat also into Polish. So they were the first translations done by academician, not via third language, but straight from Sanskrit. So she also established the first Indo-Polish Friendship Society, and that was established in Kolkata and in Mumbai, first in Kolkata and then in Mumbai. And in the Kolkata wing, the Kolkata wing's honorary president was Tagore. So that's the moment. that Poland and India are very closely connected to each other, and also by distinguished persons on both sides. Unfortunately, the career of Professor William Glabowska has been interrupted by the Second World War and also the consequences of the Second World War, because until 1973 she couldn't work at the university, she couldn't be employed at the university from political, due to political reasons. So that was the break that she had. She couldn't pursue her research, and that person has been also immortalized in the book, which I also have in my hands. The book, which is also a part of a project to immortalize this people and this part of our joint history, the part which is also the part of the Indo-Polish cultural exchange, as you can say. And this book also includes, this is the new edition in 2014, and from 2014, and it also includes the stories. As you can see, the Pala Panchavimshatika is here, it is in Polish, 25 opowieści vampira, so the vampire stories, which not exactly are about the vampire, as we know, but this is the translation that was glued to that stories in English, and I think it followed also in other languages. So Professor William Glabowska, a jewel in Indology, I would say, the first jewel, and also, let's note, it's the first woman who was very successful and also very learned. And the next, the follow-up after 1973, when the department was, we can say, re-established, because of the break, because of the political reasons, because of the political unrest between, after Second World War from 1948 until 73. Because of this reason, Indian studies ceased to exist for some time at the Jagiellonian University. But then in 73, we have another distinguished person, Professor Tadeusz Pobożniak. And again, the discipline comes back, returns to the university by the name Indianistica. This time not Indology, Indologia, but Indianistica, derived from the French. Frankly speaking, I don't know the reason why, but when I was still studying, I was a student of Indianistica, so in the Indianistique. So that is the first, that is the French name that we inherited somehow. So the Department of Indian Studies has been established with Professor Pobożniak, who was the first proper Hindi and only Hindi scholar. And not only Hindi, because his research was based on Indo-Iranian languages. So he was also researching Persian language, and he knew Persian well, and also the Gypsy language, the language of the Gypsies in Poland, which is a very interesting thing, because the Gypsies in Poland, which are said to be having the roots in Gujarat, and the Polish Gypsies, they have like a very close community in Poland, and they never let anybody from outside inside of this community. And Professor Pobożniak managed to get inside of one group of Gypsies, and that gave him the knowledge from the inside, and again the language. So he was interested in the language and the connection between the Gypsy language and the Indian languages. So he was searching for that connection, whether there is something in the language which would really confirm the legend that Gypsies are coming from Gujarat, that they are coming from India. So he was researching that. He didn't finish that research. So we have some articles published, never a book. They have been published a few years ago as a part of a journal which is being published from the university, Jagiellonian University, from the Indology department. So some articles you can see, you can read, but he never did his big opus magnum about the Gypsy Hindi connection or the Gypsy Indian languages connection. But he was also researching Buddhist and Sanskrit texts. So by this you can also see the range of languages that he had to know in order to be able to reach to those texts and to not only read them but also understand and translate them. Because as we know, knowing a language and to be able to translate from that language or into that language, there are two different spheres of knowledge. So at the time also he has established the Polish branch of the Indo-Polish Friendship Society in Kraków, because as we know, the society has been established in Kolkata first, then Mumbai, and only after that we have here the Polish branch. And after Professor Pobożniak, who died, and he left some articles unpublished, as I said, they were published, and they were also dispersed in many journals. So it is really sometimes difficult to reach to that person. This is why I'm really grateful to my colleagues that they have established a project to reprint all those old texts, and I'll talk about that later also when I talk about the translations, because I think this is a good idea and also makes us more aware of what kind of history do we have of the connection between our two countries. So the next person would be Professor Lomczak, who was the head of the Department of Indian Studies, and he was also a mostly Sanskrit scholar, not a Hindi scholar, but he was mostly interested in Sanskrit and in Dravidian languages, and he has developed the first program of 5-year studies in Indology, in Indianistic, which was basically going on until recently, because the BA/MA division in Poland has been introduced maybe not more than 10 years ago, or around that time when we have acquired the European Union system. Before that, and even I have graduated the 5-year program, which included both languages, Sanskrit and Hindi, for 3 years. And after 3 years, we had to decide our discipline. So we had to decide whether we go to modern studies and modern language, or the ancient Sanskrit. Frankly speaking, I had a big dilemma which language to choose. But because I consider myself a lively person, and I think studying Sanskrit demands sitting at home a lot, so I chose Hindi because I thought that it's also more about connecting people and talking to living persons. So that was something that appealed me more. So after Professor Lomczak, the next director of the next head of the Department of Indian Studies was late Dr. Przemysław Piekarski, who somehow was trying to pursue the work of Professor Pobożniak. So he was also interested in the Gypsy language and also this connection between Gypsies and Indians. But basically, he was a linguist, and also he was a big Kabir admirer. So he has translated Kabir, some dohas of Kabir, and from 1997 until now, the Department of Indian Studies is basically governed by Sanskrit scholars. So after Dr. Piekarski, who was a Hindi scholar, until now, the head of the Department of Indian Studies of the Indology department they are Sanskrit scholars, and their research is mainly based on Sanskrit and on the ancient India. I'll get back to that later when I talk about our research. So briefly, how it was working with Warsaw, because Warsaw also has a different but very interesting history, and also interesting names, because they are the names responsible for our cultural exchange. So 1918, so it's almost 20 years later, or even more than 20 years later than Kraków. Sanskrit was introduced at the university. 1932 marks the establishment of the Institute of Oriental Studies, and then Warsaw used to have a seminar on Indian philology, which was also was done by Professor Stanisław Szajer. Again, another big name in Indology. With one eye, I can already see the questions, but let me please get back to the questions later, if you don't mind, or at least after quite maybe after I jump into the second part of my lecture, which will be more on the Hindi and also more on our Hindi literature, and also on my own experience, which obviously I would love to talk about more. First name was Stanisław Shire, again the big name, and then we would have the Bengali teacher, Bengali Sanskrit, Bengali professor from 1935, and also Hindi from 1938. Warsaw also has this Bengali language since years, as you can see. It's quite a history of Bengali language teaching. So after that, in 1939, the institute's building and the library has been destroyed, unfortunately. After the war, also there has been like a difficult and critical moment in academia as such, also because of the Jewish issue. Let me call it like that. I don't want to go into details, but also that was a big factor in it. So in 1953, in Warsaw, it's the reestablishment of the chair of Indian philology. And again, the next name, Eugeniusz Suszkiewicz, who was the translator of the mythology of and the myths and legends of India. So again, we have an Indologist who was also Armenologist. And he was also doing his research on Indo-European languages, but he was an expert on Ramayana. We can see this is all the time Sanskrit. And then after that, we have big names, which maybe some of those names you might have heard of, because then from 1969, we have names like Professor Maria Krzysztof-Byrski, who was the ambassador to India for, I think, 8 years. And this is the person who speaks fluently Hindi, who speaks Sanskrit also, and he's like a big scholar and is like a big name in Indology, and he's still active, he's still writing, he's still researching. He has translated many works, including the law of Manu and Kama Sutra into Polish, but many more, and many dramas also. And Abhijana Shakuntalam in some parts is also being translated by Professor Byrski. Then there's Professor Mayor, who is mainly doing his research on Buddhism, and Professor Jurewicz, whose discipline and whose expertise is Rig Ved, or like Vedas in general. But then also from 1955, we also have the Hindi language and literature in Warsaw. So the two names, and still one name is still there, still active, Professor Danuta Stasik, who is still the head of the department. But her guru or gurvi was Professor Tatiana Rutkowska, and both of them, they have written and published a book by the name The History of Hindi Literature in Polish. So that was the first, and till now it's the only one book which talks about the Hindi literature from the beginning and until recently, means around 60, 70. So it's not maybe that recent, because like my research starts from the point where they finished, basically. And previously also we had names like Agnieszka Kowalska-Soni, who was doing her PhD, and she lives in Delhi. And she has published some things about Nai Kavita and the Naya Daur in Hindi literature, so 60s and later, and also Karlikowska, who was translator, and she translated few stories from Hindi into Polish and also from Punjabi. So that will be the brief introduction into the history. So you know that the history is reaching until 19th century. But let's talk about what we're doing now and what is our research and how are we reaching to India. So by now, as the researchers, we have Professor Danuta Stasik, who is still in Warsaw, professor of Hindi literature. And we have also Dr. Alexandra Turek. Her research is on the gypsies and on Rajasthan, but also on Hindi language. Then we have Dr. Monika Browarczyk. Her research is on the Dalit Hindi literature, and she's in Poznan. Then we have Dr. Teresa Miążek, who did her PhD on AGI in Wrocław. Late Dr. Przemysław Piekarski, who was in the Indology department, the only Hindi scholar. And there's also the new PhD, Piotr Borek, who also does his PhD, his research on Hindi, but his research is based on Ritikal. So a little bit like older literature. And there will be us, means my two gurus, my two gurvis, Professor Renata Czekalska, who was my teacher of Hindi literature, and Professor Agnieszka Kurkiewicz, who was my teacher of linguistics. And three of us, we are in blue just because we come from the Indology department, but we have decided to part our ways and to establish a new department of modern studies. So our department is based in a different faculty. It's not the philology department. It's not the philology faculty. It is the faculty of the international relations. And there we have in the Institute of the Middle and Far East, we have established the Department of South Asia, which is modern oriented and which is modern languages oriented. So it is based on Hindi and Urdu knowledge. First, maybe with the time we can expand into Bengali and Tamil. Let's see. We have just started, so it is still in our plans. So three of us, and also we have two PhD students now doing their research. So three of us still working on modern India, and also including modern languages. So the books that have been published until now by us, the Hindi scholars, the still like the academics. The first was in 1992, and I'm really happy. This is the only thing that I'm happy that I'm talking to you from my home. Otherwise, I would love to be there in person and talk to you in person. But that is the advantage that I have all the books with me, and I was really, really nicely surprised when I piled them up here on my desk to see that there are so many of them, that we have so many books that we have already published, and there are so many plans also to publish new things and to research new things. So the first book was by Professor Stashik. The first, of course, is the history of Hindi literature, which is in Hindi, but Out of India, Image of the West in Hindi Literature by Stashik, 1994, published in Manohar in India. So that was the first, that is her PhD, so that is the first book. Then we have also the origins of modern Hindi poetry from Chhayavat till Naikavita, and that is the book in Polish, Rodowody nowoczesnej poezji Hindi, including also translations. So we have the introduction, but there's also translation by chosen poems. Poets, I think it's Mahadevi Varma here. So the pattern is that we have 5 poems, and then there is interpretation of a poem here. So if anybody wants to read and anybody wants to know something about India, it's not that it's only translation and you just read it as an ordinary book. You also have an explanation. You also have an introduction here. So it's very easy to, if somebody is interested in literature, he can just reach out to the book and know more. There will be also the 3 Jewels of the Desert, but that is also published in English, about the narratives of like the Dhola Maru story in Rajasthani languages and in Hindi, but that's done by Alexandra Turek from Warsaw. Then again, my humble contribution to the field, my book, which is based on my PhD, Literature as a Process of Writing, based on the prose and the connection between prose and poetry in the modern writing in Hindi. And basically it's on the Bhopal School of Hindi Writing. So that's the contribution from 2015. I hope I'll be able to translate it into either Hindi or English so that it can also reach the wider audience, because I think not many books in the critical writing in Hindi is happening now. I also hear the voices from the critics from India. So this is why I'm saying that. And then there is the last book, which is published in 3 languages. So if you want to read that, you don't have any excuse. Koi bahana nahi hoga, because this is published first in Polish, and then in English, and then in Hindi also. So this is the Mandala of Words by my professor, my Gurvi, Professor Renata Czekalska, including also translation of many poems by Ashok Bajpai. So that is the recent 2017 contribution to the field as a critical writing. These are the books I'm not including because there will be too many of articles. So, but you have the names. So if you would be interested, Academia Edu is there, so it's easy to reach out and easy to know what we are researching now. Some nice contributions also include translations, and translation for me makes a lot of fun, I would say. Maybe it's not a proper academic word, but I would say it's really something that gives me a pleasure, and also it gives a lot of it's also very difficult, I would say. But there are some projects and there are some initiatives that are based on translations and are based on also including some introductions. So they are there to bring the Indian classics into Polish. So the first series is Literatura Indyjska in Polish, means the Indian literature, and this is a series which is basically not an academic one, but this is the series which is there to like ordinary readers. The ordinary readers should just to reach out and just to be able to have the pleasure of reading. So the first book was 2007, and that was the gift to Kunvar Narayan as for his birthday in 2007. So it looks like a notebook, and this is przez słowa means beyond words or through words. So you can translate it like शब्दों के ज़रिए, but it's also like शब्दों के पार. So this is the first contribution, and also including some photographs of the poet, and also including the biodata and stuff like this, so that it's easier to know. And you know, the Kunvar Narayan, I think he deserves to open that series. Then again, the second one is Ashok Bajpai, 2008, and Gramatyka Wyobraźni, the grammar of imagination. So that's the second one. Then there is Bilhana's stories, but Bilhana is Sanskrit, so I'll skip that. And the next contribution is again by my humble effort, Teji Grover's Nila, the book translated into Polish with the introduction. And Harivansh Rai Bachcha's Madhushala, which is a joint effort by 4 scholars, and this Madhushala, Miodosytnia, which we have in Polish, we have exact word as Madhushala. So we are really privileged, and this is the bilingual edition. So for anybody who can read in original, he can take the pleasure of reading the original and then to read the translation. So his rubayats are in Polish as well. And the one more contribution are the short stories collection that we are working on now. They were it was supposed to happen before, but as you can see, 2012 it was the last contribution, the last book published under the name of the series. It's not the last till now. We're not saying the last word, but it just happened that between this 2012 and now we were just reestablishing our department, and it also takes time. And unfortunately, translation is not considered as academic work. And as we all know, we have to fight for points and accreditations. So we are more obliged to do the proper academic work, means writing articles and doing research, rather than to do translations, which if I would have a choice, I would rather do translations. So as translations, not only us, but we also have prose translated from Nirmal Verma, Prem Chand, and there will be 2 collections of short stories. There are 2 or 3 more, but they are the most significant. Sandały and the other one, Taniec Siedmiu Zasłon, which is they are pretty old books, but they are still there. They are still available. And also poetry by many poets, also dispersed in many journals. So I hope that one day we can also do something like an anthology, because it's maybe difficult to find them, or you have to know what you're looking for, and sometimes it's difficult. There's also something which might be of your interest, and it is available on the market. Is the translation, the result of the translation project done by Ashok Bajpayee and Renata Czekalska. Ashok Bajpayee is known for his love for Russian language, for Russian poetry, but also for Polish poetry. And this is how the project was born. In 2001, the first book came out, and by chance I have this book here. So this is Tadeusz Różewicz, Dziwankę bicią bić. This is the first translation, which actually gathers the translations not only translated straight from Polish language, but also via English. The idea of the project was to get a Polish scholar and to get a Hindi poet and to translate the literature straight from the original, not via English, not via German, not via any other language, but straight from the original. Unfortunately, it's not possible for any Indian writer to do it straight from Polish, but this joint cooperation was working very well. So we have these four big names of the Polish literature: Tadeusz Różewicz, Zbigniew Herbert, Czesław Miłosz, the Nobel Prize winner, and also Wisława Szymborska, also the bearer of the Nobel Prize. So that was the first four. And this is how it was planned. And for those of you who would like to read it in one book, there is also an edition, and everything is published by Vani Prakashan, and it's still available. So Hamare or Andhere ke Bich, Char Polish Kavi. So this is the joint. This is the chosen poems from those four collections. So you can also, if you're interested, it's not the four collections are bilingual. This is only in Hindi. So you can also, if you're interested, you can read, and you can also know something about the Polish soul via Hindi. And the last one, not the last one, but the one of the last contributions, 2011. This is the John Paul II triptych, which is also translated into Hindi. So even this thing you can also read in two languages. It's also in two. So if somebody wants to know the writing of Pope, he can reach out and also read it in Hindi, and it's really done in a proper way. And the last contribution, 2017, translation of poems by Ryszard Krynicki, very well-known Kraków poet. So this is the last contribution, Redke ek kan me. So this is the last one, and pursuing that in a way, we have also two other books, but this is not done by Ashok Bajpayee and by Renata Czekalska, but the contribution, which is a translation of Olga Tokarczuk, again the Nobel Prize winner writer, it's by Maria Puri, who is a Polish person, Polish woman, married to an Indian, living for many years in India, also teaching Polish in Delhi University for quite a time, very much engaged and also very dedicated to the friendship between India and Poland. And she has translated 3 or 4 stories in this collection, Kamre. So I believe it was published in 2011 or 14. I think it was in 2011, and it's still available if you would like to read. It's still there. No, sorry, it is 2014. Tokarczuk is 14, and there is also the collection of Adam Zagajewski's poems, Farai Sundartame, which is published. That collection is published 2011. And this is the joint work and joint effort by Maria Puri and by Monika Browarczyk. So there is no cooperation with any Hindi writer. This is only a contribution by Polish person translating into Hindi. And also, as for teaching Hindi, we have few places. Like you can think that Poland is such a small place, but still we have quite a number of places where Hindi is being taught. So Warsaw University, and they have it on BA and MA level. In Kraków, you can study Hindi in 3 places. So we have the Department of Languages and Literatures of India and South Asia. So that is the former Indology department. This is my former department. So there you can study Hindi on the level of BA and MA. Then it's our department of South Asia. There is BA and MA. I don't know why there is the question mark because we have BA and MA studies. I must have it must have slipped and I didn't notice that. So BA and MA level, and there is also the studies of comparative studies of civilizations where they're introducing some Hindi on a very basic level, but there is some introduction of Hindi. There is also Hindi on the BA level on the same basis, like very basic Hindi in Poznań and in Wrocław. And also for some time it was in Katowice. I was the first teacher of Katowice English department who has introduced something very interesting. English department having English language combining it with Oriental languages. So very professional approach. But they introduced Indian languages and they had Hindi and Bengali for some time, but now they stopped receiving new students. So that was only, I think, for 5 years. But we also had that in Katowice. And as for teaching Hindi, we have the same pattern on two sides. We have a little bit more like this Department of South Asia. This is our department, the one that you see on the right side. So in the Indology department, you have Hindi or Sanskrit, which is your main subject. Let's say like the leading language, which gives you the proficiency. In our case, since we are modern oriented and we are not philologists per se, so we are teaching the more colloquial language, but also language which gives you the ability to read and to understand, obviously. But we have the BA level, which is 180 hours plus 30 hours of translations and some workshops. And the same pattern goes to MA studies, where we have 180 per year. So it's quite a number, and also some workshops based on Hindi, and also additionally 60 hours of Urdu separately. So that I think that gives quite a number of the language teaching hours. Since we are not a philology department, but our idea when we were establishing the department was that Hindi or any language, which is the regional language, is the tool to know the region. So without that, it's not possible to know the real soul of the region that you are studying. So this is compulsory and this is necessary to know the language. Here in the department, as Hindi teachers, it's me. Since I'm teaching there since 2003, I'm teaching Hindi since 2003, but in the Institute of the Middle and Far East from 2006. And also, besides Hindi, I also teach Urdu. And there is also Marcin Ciemniewski, who is our PhD candidate. I have the pleasure to be his half supervisor, let's say, like additional supervisor. Marcin Ciemniewski is doing his PhD on the detective stories in Hindi. So something very interesting. There's also another PhD student who is doing her PhD on Kashmiri issue and Kashmiriyat, but it is less based on languages. Martin's PhD is based mainly on language. And as my experiences, because as you can see, I teach since 2003, and it's not only the language, and it's a language on all levels, but it's also literature. And as for me, when I was doing my PhD, and also after that, I have introduced new courses of reading of modern Hindi poetry, because I think that you have to know the soul by knowing also the literature, especially that, as you know, it's not only about reading, but it's also about knowing the literature. Because whenever I talk to anybody in India and I just say that yes, I read that writer, everybody says, so you have to quote something, because if you don't know it by heart, it means that you haven't read it. So you have to, if you read Kabir, you have to know some dohas, and if you know Mirabai, you have to know any dohas, and if you read Nirala, so you have to know at least some part of his poetry. Otherwise, we don't believe you that you have read. Reading is forgetting, and remembering is like something else. This is when you read with your heart. So I have introduced those courses, including like the literature from Maithili Charan Gupta's moment, but the moment when the literature was getting rid of that corset of the Sanskrit poetics, and it was getting freed more towards the free verse. So Chayavarna Kavita and then some Kalin Kavita, which I call till now. So this is the contemporary literature. So my first topic was poetry, then of course also prose. And then I expanded also the courses on Hindi translation, which were based usually on 2 or 3 stories, and there were like the issues, the problems of translation was being discussed. I have also included some other materials and also some more vivid, I would say, some more vivid literature based on my own experiences and of course also on my own taste. So there will be Krishna Baldev Vaid, there will be Nirmal Verma, there will be Krishna Sopti and Jyotsna Milan, and there will be also articles by renowned writers and critics. For example, Agyei, but also Ashok Bajpayee and other critics. My teacher from JNU, Manager Pandey, and people like people who I admire also, and I also read them and I wanted also to share them with my pupils, with my students. And the teaching materials that we have, we still don't know. We have a book, like a one textbook, which has been published by Professor Danuta Stasik, and it has 2 parts. It's a Hindi language course. It's not an ideal book, but there is one. I hope that one day we will have some more comprehensive book that we could also use as a teach yourself guide, because I can see that I can see nowadays like a big revivalism in interest in Hindi language and everything which is connected to Hindi, because obviously through Hindi language, you can know many other things. So there will be the Bollywood movies, there will be the songs, there will be the poems, there will be the memes also. That everything that is readable, that is comprehensible through the language. So whatever it is, I'm really happy to see that because when people are motivated by their own means, by their own reasons, it's the best way for a teacher to teach, because then you don't have to convince them that there is a sense in what you're doing. So this is the book in Polish. This is the 4th one. This is the Danuta Stasik one. Otherwise, we use the textbooks, and also we use our own materials, whatever we read, also whatever we think that it will be appealing to the students, especially on the higher level. We teach them to go through that. It's also including the cultural materials and whatever happening in the world nowadays too. So the political matters also, everything through Hindi. Also to show them that the proficiency that they are getting in the language, it also gives them the ability to understand, and also understand something more than only something which is written in English and available for people who are living in English. Because I think that this is the idea that I think makes our department different from other modern Asia or South Asia departments. And in many South Asia departments, you don't have the language. The language is only additionally for those who want to study. In our case, it is compulsory, and as you can see, there are many languages. There are many language hours that students are being obliged to take, and everything is compulsory. So the pressure goes on the language a lot. This is what we believe that constructs or it's responsible or is facilitating the understanding of India, like the true understanding. Not only English translation, but the real words in the real language. So basically, this is the idea here, and of course we also organize many other activities, because we also have to go, not only have to, but also want to go outside of the university. Here too, you can see 2 photographs of our students. We have some activities like the Festival of Asian Studies, where our students are writing some words or names in Devanagari and other scripts, only to introduce also the script and also to make people interested. And also any aspect of Indian culture is being introduced, from food to, as you can see, the workshop on how to wear a sari. which for all of you might be something very common, because you usually, like, at least half of the population, excluding men, I suppose, wear sari from time to time, if not every day. So it's something very common. But in India, in Poland, it's still something which is very appealing, and the workshops, they're also gathering a lot of people and a lot of attention. We also have activities like celebrating Holi, Diwali, and all other festivals, which are being done by the Indian community in Poland, also jointly by the Indians and by the Polish, and also all other activities that are promoting India and opening the eyes on not only India, because as you know, we all work on South Asia, but basically India would be the first reference, just because all of us come from Indology and from Indian studies. So that would be like like I said at the beginning, this is the first love, and from that love you can depart to other, but you will still return to the basics, means to Sanskrit and to the knowledge that you gained on your studies studying Indology. So I think I would conclude saying that I'm really very happy that we have this, I would say, rather rich history of relationships between India and Poland. I really regret one thing, because as you can see, I have shown you, I have discussed many works, academic works, translation works, which are done jointly, which are done by our Polish scholars on India in either language. I mean, it can be in Polish, it's in English, sometimes also in Hindi. But I really regret that even though we have, I think, 60 years of history of Polish language in India, because I assume that the department which teaches Polish in the Delhi University was celebrating 60 years of its establishing. So despite of the fact that it's almost 60 years of teaching Polish, we still don't have any one single person from India who would study Polish enough to be able to translate Polish literature into Hindi. So that is a big regret. I still hope that it will happen one day, because there's still interest in reading Polish poetry. I can see that also by my friends, not only writers, but also just friends who are just interested in reading, and they also reach to different languages and also reach to different literatures, and also happen to like Polish literature. I would love them to read in original. Maybe that will happen one day. Until the time we are here and we are still ready and to work, and we are really very motivated to pursue our work. So I think, let me conclude with this. I leave this hanging. I also leave this hanging for you to encourage your students also maybe to pick up this language, which is Polish, and to polish the Polish enough to be able to read first, and then maybe to share their own knowledge to other people by translating it. Thank you. Should I make a stop now, or should I go to questions and answers, Dr. Sengupta? How should I proceed now?
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your pearls of wisdom. And that was really, really very nice, interesting session. Now, I would request all the attendees, they can send their questions in the chat box. While sending the questions, please choose the option um, all attendees. All panelists. Please choose the option all panelists so that I can see the question. In the meanwhile, ma'am, I would like to share observation from Professor Kiran Devendra. She is head of History Department, Amity School of Liberal Arts. Ma'am is saying, you're a wonderful scholar who is good in multidisciplinarity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I can also see that this in the box of question and answers, I already have 5 questions.
Then please you choose, I think 1 or 2 questions you can take, because it's already 4:58. So
okay. There will be two questions by Shruti Chaudhary. What pushed me into studying Indian literature? Indian literature, that was I was always interested in literature as such. But I think more funny story would be how I started to study Indian languages, because I was dedicated to the idea for my whole high school, dedicated to the idea that I will be studying psychology. So for the four years of my high school, I was sure that the psychology is the discipline and this is the subject of my life. I would read all the books of philosophy and psychology, and that was already fixed that psychology is the thing. And then I came to Krakow, and then I had the booklet of the whole the booklet like a informative book saying what kind of studies you can pick up at the Jagiellonian University. And then by chance, and it's really, I don't believe in chances, but this is how it happened. I was just going through that book and it opened on one page and I saw something like Indology department. And because I was interested in Indian philosophy, so it's not that I wasn't familiar with India, but I was never thinking, I never knew that India might be a subject to study at the university. So when it opened on that page and I saw that it's possible to study philology, and me coming from the background of knowing German and English, and German was my first language. I mean, not the Polish my first language, but the first language I learned was German. So I was fluent in German. So I never came to that idea that I could be studying Indian languages. And then because I love tough things, and I like challenges. So it was challenging enough to study Sanskrit and Hindi. So I have applied there. I also applied on the psychology department and also to other departments, and I got in. And then I had to choose. And then I thought that it might not have been like a coincidence that the booklet opened on that page, and I went to Indology to study India. So this is how I'm here now talking to you after so many years, and it happened no, I won't tell you when it happened, but that happened some time ago. But this is what happened, and then also, obviously that was the consequence was I was dedicated to Sanskrit as well, but I saw myself as talking to people rather than only reading what other people in ancient times have written already. So this is why Hindi, and then literature, obviously, and modern literature, and it's still there in my heart. I'm still doing my research on this. So obviously, Bollywood songs are part of my my research, and they are also part of my but no singing will happen. I know how it works. It's like with quoting Kabir. So now, since I said that I know Bollywood songs, you want to listen to my voice, but I can't. Maybe some other time, or maybe when I come in person one day to Amity University, which I would love to visit one day, and maybe then. Which writer and work is close to Polish sensibility? It depends on what sensibility we're talking about. If we talk about those writers that I have mentioned, those big names, Różewicz and others, I would say that the first soul, and this is also the first writer that I was happy to read in original almost everything by the writer, was Nirmal Verma. And maybe because he was also living abroad and he was living for some time in Eastern Europe, maybe this is the sensibility. But I think he would be the closest one. But then we're talking about prose, not the poetry. From poetry, there will be many writers, really. But I think it also depends on the reader. What you exactly search in the literature that you are reading currently. So I think it's a difficult question, which it's really difficult to answer in few words.
Dr. Yuning, there is one question from my student. Yes. She's a student of mine in BA Honours History, and she wants to know that during your research, which script, text, or poem impacted your work the most?
When I was working on my PhD, if I am to mention one name, and that should be a writer, that would be Nirala. So if it's only one name, that would be Nirala for sure. That would be the first name, and then Udayan Vajpayee, and all his works, including poetry and poems. But Nirala whatever I read by Nirala and by Trilochan, I really have goosebumps whenever I read it. It's something that it's appealing a lot to my sensibility, I would say. So Nirmal Varma will be there, of course, and KB Vaid. He's also there with his very strange writing. But yeah, I think Nirala, yeah. Whatever, I mean, from whichever period of his writing, it will be him. Are there any more questions? I think there is something on the, but I can't see. There will be questions from Roshni and Gupta, but I don't know.
There's one question, ma'am.
But this is the one question
what sort of connection do you think is there between Indian and Polish gypsies? Because we have gypsies in Europe as well. So is there a connection, cultural connection between the two? This question has been asked by Dr. Vinod Kumar. He happens to be a colleague at the Amity School of Liberal Arts.
With the gypsies, it's a very complicated matter because when it comes also to their identity, to their culture, and to their language, you know, in whichever country they live, because they have their own specific language, but in whichever country they live, they acquire the language of that country and then mix it into their own language, so that it is really very difficult to understand what they are talking, and they're also very difficult for them to communicate between the communities. They have the main language, but then they're mixing, like for example, in Italy there will be Italian, and also in Poland they mix a lot of Polish words. The problem also to research gypsies is that they are very close. They are basically a very close community. So they are not letting anybody from outside. They even have words for people from outside, meaning outsiders, the others, the ones that we don't want to have anything in common with. So it's really difficult to say. But then we have also like a marvelous and wonderful writer. It was a woman. And she was a gypsy, and she did something which was completely not allowed for a woman and a gypsy. She was a free soul, and she was composing poetry, and poetry which she was also, which she would also sing. So it's something like the oral, you know, the local traditions in India that you also see. Like, for example, the Bhakti also was about composing in local languages and singing those songs till now. It happens. So she would be the first poet, the poetess of the gypsies. And she was friends with a researcher, Pitowski, who was an admirer of gypsies he was researching, and he would write it down, and he has published her poems. And when you read those poems I mean, it has like a little bit, like it's translated into Polish, and also you have the like a small dictionary at the end, which explains some words. But then you have so many words which are completely taken from Hindi. For example, bacha, acha. Acha is acha. Bacha is bacha. And it's the description for the same word. So acha means fine. So if gypsy in Poland says acha, acha, means same as acha, acha. And when it says bacha, bacha means like bacha, kid, a child. So there are so many words which are exactly looking like taken from Hindi. So there must be the connection, but the thing is, there is nobody to pursue the research. And I think the community also opens a little bit. Even I have neighbors who are living nearby, and they are gypsies. And I only see them and we just say hi, hello. I never have the courage to ask them something more, and they never go into more than hi, hello, but they're very friendly. And maybe one day, I mean, because I'm really very interested in which language and what they're speaking, and sometimes I hear the kids speaking, and I have the impression that some words are sounding very familiar, but then to make sure that they are meaning the same as in Hindi or as in Gujarati, or for example Rajasthani, or in this Western language, I would have to ask them first, and I still gather the courage to do that. Maybe one day I will.
Dr. Camilla, we are highly appreciative of your presentation, and we are truly amazed to see the volume of your work. You have done commendable translation work. So in that pertinence, I would like to request you to give a kind of, tips kind of thing, like a kind of message for our students, what it takes, what it requires to be a good translator. And I would like to request you to give your, tips, in Hindi. आप थोड़ा हिंदी में बोल के समझाइए हमें.
अच्छा, मैं कोशिश कर सकती हूँ, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि ये समझाना थोड़ा सा भी मुश्किल हो सकता है. सबसे पहले ट्रांसलेशन या अनुवाद करना थोड़ा मुश्किल हो सकता है हर किसी के लिए, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि सबसे पहले तो इस दूसरे का दिल जानना चाहिए. वो जो आपने शुरू में कहा था ना कि अगर नेल्सन मंडेला का कोट पेश करते हुए ना कि दिल को एड्रेस करने के लिए हमको कुछ मतलब थोड़ा गहरा कनेक्शन, गहरा वो रिश्ता बनाना या बनवाना चाहिए. तो ये मुझे लगता है कि सबसे पहले एक भाषा सीखना तो एक ही चीज है, लेकिन ये भाषा या इस भाषा में जो लिखा हुआ है इसको समझाना सही ढंग से ये दूसरी चीज है. और इसके बाद अगर हम अच्छे से अगर हम ढंग से इसको समझ सकते हैं तो हमको इसको शेयर करना चाहिए दूसरों से. हाँ, तो इसीलिए हम इसका अनुवाद करना तो कम से कम थोड़ा सा भी कोशिश करना चाहिए होगा. इसके बाद तो सबसे पहले पोलिश भाषा आपको सीखना पड़ेगा और इसके बाद पोलैंड के बारे में थोड़ा सा जानना और अच्छे से पोलैंड का जो रूह होता है, पोलिश लोगों का रूह जो होता है, इसको समझाना और इसके बाद इसका ट्रांसलेशन भी, इसका अनुवाद भी करने की कोशिश करना. मुझे लगता है यही शायद तरीका होगा.
बहुत अच्छा. Yes, Dr. Parul.
I would now request Dr. Parul Yadav, Associate Professor, Amity School of Liberal Arts, to kindly deliver the vote of thanks.
On behalf of Amity School of Liberal Arts, I would like to thank our distinguished guest, Dr. Camilla Unique, for making this webinar interesting and meaningful. We are grateful to Director ASLA, Professor Sanjay Kumar Jha, for his continuous support and valuable suggestions which have greatly helped towards the successful organization of this webinar. I take this opportunity to thank all the participants, faculty members, and students. Also, I would like to thank Amity IT team. Last but not the least, I thank Mr. Dinesh from ASLA for his continuous support. I once again thank everyone whose contribution has made this webinar a successful one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if I can say two words, I would like to really thank you for the invitation. And I'm really very, very happy to be here. And I hope that one day we can also meet in person in Delhi as fast as we can. But let's see, it's a very difficult time to all of us now. But it's also a time that we can also use to read and use to learn something new. So I would really recommend to reach out, since you know that even in Hindi you have a lot of things that you can read from the Polish literature. So maybe that will be the time to reach out to those books and to read something and to know something more about India, and then to discover it for yourself. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for the invitation, Professor, Doctor. Thank you so much. It was a very pleasure to be here and to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr.